Something big just happened behind the scenes in Toronto, and even though it's not about players stepping onto the field, it might be just as important for the future of this franchise. The Blue Jays decided to lock in two of the most influential figures in the organization, extending both their manager and the man responsible for shaping the roster. And when you look at the timing of this move, coming right after a deep postseason run that pushed all the way to the World Series, it starts to feel like a statement. This front office isn't just reacting to success, they're committing to it. Let's start with the dugout because that's where a lot of fans tend to focus first. John Schneider is officially staying longer, and honestly, this tells you everything about how the organization views his growth. This is a guy who didn't arrive as a finished product. Early on, there were moments where decisions raised eyebrows, games where fans questioned the timing, the substitutions, the overall feel from managing at the highest level. But that's part of the journey. No manager steps into Major League Baseball and immediately masters every situation. What separates the good from the great is how they evolve. And that's exactly what Schneider has been doing. Over the past few seasons, you could actually see that transformation happening in real time. The hesitation that once defined some of his in-game decisions started to disappear. Instead, you began to notice quicker reactions, more confidence in matchups, and a willingness to trust not just the stars, but the entire roster. That's a huge shift. Managing a baseball team isn't just about writing a lineup card. It's about understanding personalities, building trust, and knowing how to get the best out of 26 different individuals who all respond differently under pressure. And that's where Schneider really made his mark. He built relationships. You can tell by the way players respond to him, by the energy in the dugout, by how guys off the bench stay ready and contribute when their number is called. That doesn't happen by accident. It comes from a manager who is deeply involved, who communicates constantly, and who understands that leadership isn't one size fits all. Some players need a direct push, others need patience and encouragement, and finding that balance is one of the hardest parts of the job. What stands out even more is how he stayed true to his own identity while growing into the role. There's an edge to him, a fire that shows up in big moments. He's not afraid to defend his players, not afraid to show emotion, and in a clubhouse full of composed personalities, that kind of energy can be incredibly valuable. It creates accountability, but it also creates unity. When players know their manager has their back, it changes the way they approach the game. Now, shift the focus to the front office, because this is where things get even more layered. Ross Atkins securing a long-term extension sends a clear message that the organization believes in the blueprint he's been building. And this is where opinions can get divided, because his tenure hasn't been a straight line of success. There were seasons where expectations weren't met, stretches where decisions were heavily criticized, and moments where it felt like the direction of the team was uncertain. But if you zoom out and look at the full picture, you start to see what led to this moment. Building a contender in baseball isn't something that happens overnight. It requires patience, calculated risks, and the ability to adjust when things don't go as planned. Atkins has been at the center of that process, shaping the roster piece by piece, making moves that didn't always pay off immediately, but contributed to the bigger picture. The turning point came with the roster that finally clicked. The combination of key signings, player development, and strategic additions came together at the right time, and suddenly, this was a team capable of competing with anyone. Reaching the World Series doesn't happen by luck alone. It's the result of decisions stacking up over time, of a vision that eventually translates into performance on the field. And that's why this extension matters so much. It's not just a reward for one successful season. It's a vote of confidence in the entire process. The organization is essentially saying that the person who built this roster deserves the opportunity to take it even further, to not just reach that level again, but to push beyond it. There's also a strategic element here that can't be ignored. With major changes potentially coming in the near future, including roster turnover and contract situations, having stability in leadership becomes crucial. You don't want uncertainty at the top when you're trying to navigate critical decisions that will shape the next phase of the team. By extending Atkins, the Blue Jays are ensuring that the same vision guiding them now will continue into the next chapter. And that brings an interesting dynamic into play. Because while the team is clearly in a competitive window, there's also an underlying transition approaching. Some key players won't be around forever, and the challenge becomes balancing the urgency to win now with the need to prepare for what comes next. That's not an easy line to walk, and it puts even more pressure on the front office to make the right calls at the right time. At the same time, this move eliminates any doubt about who's in charge of that transition. There's no short-term thinking here, no temporary solutions. This is a long-term commitment, and it suggests that the organization believes the foundation already in place is strong enough to support sustained success, not just a single run. And when you combine that with the confidence they've shown in Schneider, it paints a clear picture of continuity. The manager and the architect of the roster are both staying, both aligned, and both expected to build on what they've already achieved. That kind of stability can be a powerful advantage, especially in a league where constant change often leads to inconsistency. What makes this even more fascinating is how it sets the tone for everything that comes next. Every decision moving forward, every adjustment to the roster, every in-game call, it's all part of a larger plan that now has the backing of the organization for years to come. And that kind of clarity can influence not just the team internally, but also how players around the league view this franchise as a destination. Because at the end of the day, success in baseball isn't just about talent. It's about structure, leadership, and belief. And right now, the Blue Jays are doubling down on all three, making it clear that they're not satisfied with just getting close. They're aiming to stay in the conversation, to remain a threat, and to build something that lasts well beyond a single season. As this situation continues to unfold, what really starts to spark debate is not just the extensions themselves, but what they represent moving forward. Because now the pressure shifts. It's no longer about proving whether these guys deserve to stay. It's about validating the belief that's been placed in them. And in a league where expectations can flip overnight, that kind of commitment raises the stakes in a big way. Take a closer look at the front office side of things, and you'll see why this conversation isn't so simple. Ross Atkins has now been given the runway to shape not just the current roster, but the next version of this team as well. That's where opinions begin to split, because while the recent success speaks loudly, there's still a memory among fans of the seasons where things didn't quite come together. And that tension between past frustrations and present optimism is exactly what makes this extension such a fascinating move. Because if you think about it, this past year had a different kind of urgency attached to it. There was a sense that everything needed to click, that the margin for error was shrinking. And when you operate under that kind of pressure, it can influence the way decisions are made. Sometimes it pushes executives to be more aggressive, to take risks they might not normally take, to chase results with a little more intensity. The question now becomes whether that same level of urgency carries over, or if things shift into a more calculated, long-term approach. And that's where the timeline of the organization becomes incredibly important. There are key pieces on this roster that won't be here forever, contracts that will eventually run out, and roles that will need to be filled by the next wave of talent. Managing that transition is one of the toughest challenges any front office can face. You're trying to stay competitive in the present while also preparing for the future, and one wrong move can throw everything off balance. What this extension does is remove any doubt about who will be making those decisions. There's no uncertainty, no looming contract situation that could affect the direction of the team. Ross Atkins now has the security to plan ahead, to think beyond just the next season, and to build with a clear vision in mind. And whether you agree with every move he's made or not, that level of stability can be a major advantage when navigating complex roster decisions. At the same time, it also means there are no excuses left. When you're given that kind of trust, the expectation is that results will follow. Fans aren't going to look back at what happened years ago. They're going to focus on what happens next. Can this team sustain its success? Or was that World Series run the peak? That's the question that will hang over everything moving forward, and it's one that can only be answered on the field. Then there's the dynamic between the front office and the dugout, which becomes even more critical now. With both Ross Atkins and John Schneider locked in, the alignment between roster construction and in-game management has to be stronger than ever. Every move, every decision, every adjustment needs to feel connected. Because when those two sides are fully in sync, that's when teams find consistency over the course of a long season. And from what we've seen, that connection has been growing. The way the roster is utilized, the flexibility in lineups, the trust in depth players, all of it reflects a shared understanding of how this team wants to play. That doesn't happen overnight. It's built through communication, through trial and error, and through a willingness to adapt when things aren't working. But now comes the real test. Because it's one thing to build that connection while climbing toward success, and another to maintain it once expectations are sky high. Opponents adjust, pressure increases, and every weakness gets exposed over time. That's where leadership becomes even more important, not just in terms of making the right decisions, but in keeping the team focused and resilient when challenges arise. Another layer to this is how the players themselves respond to this stability. When a team shows commitment to its leadership, it can create a sense of belief throughout the clubhouse. Guys know who they're playing for, they understand the system, and they can focus entirely on performance without worrying about constant changes at the top. That kind of environment can bring out the best in a roster, especially over the grind of a full season. At the same time, it also raises internal competition. Because when the structure is set, the focus shifts entirely to execution. Players know that roles will be earned, that opportunities will come from performance, and that consistency will be rewarded. That's how strong teams are built, not just through talent, but through a culture that demands accountability at every level. And as all of this continues to develop, there's still that lingering question in the background. Was this past season the beginning of something bigger, or was it the perfect storm where everything came together at the right time? That's the kind of question that doesn't get answered quickly. It plays out over months, over series, over moments where the team is tested in ways that go far beyond what we've already seen. Because sustaining success in baseball is one of the hardest things to do. It requires constant adjustment, constant awareness, and a willingness to evolve even when things are going well. And now, with these extensions in place, the responsibility to make that happen falls squarely on the shoulders of the people who have been trusted to lead this team forward. And as the next phase begins to take shape, all eyes will be on how those decisions start to unfold, how the roster evolves, and how this team responds when the spotlight gets even brighter and the expectations continue to rise with every single game they step onto the field. That's all for this update. If you enjoyed the video and want to stay up to date with exclusive news about the Los Angeles Dodgers, be sure to subscribe to our channel and hit that like button. We always appreciate your comments and feedback. See you in the next video.